What's up, guys? Welcome to the first episode of Quirks, where we talk about all kinds of weird shit. Music, the universe, music. Did I say music twice? I think I did.
You said it twice.
Yeah, well, I'm a musician, so that's probably why I did it. But we're going to talk about flat Earth theory today. That was our first topic of choice. But first, before we get started, my name's Jesse Scott, longtime musician. We got Profi piping in from San Francisco. Connor, you give a shot of Profi. Yeah, there's Profi from San Francisco. And we've got Cody, who is a wonderful person that we just met from Portland, Oregon.
From Craigslist.
And from Craigslist, of all places.
Maybe we should dig into that story a little bit.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting.
Actually pretty interesting. Okay, let me talk about how we decided to start doing this. Profi and I have been friends for, I don't know, coming up on 20 years, 15 years now? Something like that.
Oh, man, it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. But him and I have always had these in-depth conversations about life, the universe, crazy things. I mean, it's just you name it. And we have been throwing around the idea of doing a podcast for a really long time because we figured, well, how hard could it be to do this live? I mean, how hard could this possibly be to talk about the things that we love and do it in a live format? So
little did we know.
But we also decided that we thought that it would be good to add a third person to it, and not just any particular person. We thought that adding a female in particular would be good because we didn't want to make it a big sausage fest, which would tend to happen with a bunch of 40-year-old dudes sitting around drinking beer and just talking about bullshit. But we wanted to add someone who was female energy to balance it out. And also, it was really interesting that we found Cody because not only is she super sharp and really intelligent and articulate, she's super organized. And she's also about 20 years younger than the both of us. I'm 42. I know that you're about 42. And I think that it's been really cool to see what the perspective is from the generation that is the one that's following us. And
absolutely.
So to sum all that up, actually, I think what we really just needed was somebody that was somebody that was actually smart.
Well,
I think we found that.
Female, so. but also female. I mean, I think it's important. I think for a broader audience perspective to have female energy to balance it out. You know?
Well, being a female gives her an advantage with being smart.
I qualify as that.
Yeah, totally.
Well, then this is perfect then.
So yeah, we started Quirks, and it's basically just a foray into the unusual, essentially.
Yeah.
So, and we all love talking about it, and I think it's going to be really fun to talk about things that I think need to be talked about, especially in the current climate of the world. It seems like being politically correct or not talking about weird fringe things. I think that we're starting to see it happen a lot more. I love the Joe Rogan podcast. That's a huge inspiration for me for this whole thing. I think that it's really cool that he's created this forum that people can talk about these fringe things, psychedelics, science, whatever. And we want to talk about all of that here because I think that it's important to continue those conversations. That's how the world changes, is by spreading ideas. So it's kind of what this is all about, at least for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Cody, what made you actually feel comfortable enough to get involved with this mess that is Scott and I? I'm really fascinated on the background there. I mean, I know a little bit about it, but I think you could maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Are you asking about the background of my Craigslist searchings, or?
Yeah, wherever you think the beginning.
Yeah, because Craigslist is full of sludge generally.
I fucking love Craigslist.
I have a love-hate relationship.
Were you like wandering through the casual encounter section?
Oh my god, I didn't post it there.
Is that how this started? Right?
No.
Come on, give us a little background.
Oh god, I've been doing massage therapy for about 3 years. I know that doesn't sound that long, but
So you were looking through the casual encounter section.
For the very I was there. You found me. But for my frail hands, 3 years is a long time. So I was just looking for other things I wanted to expand my horizons with.
Yeah.
And I saw the ad for Quirks, and it was just a really nice, fun-loving ad, and I don't know, I could feel the energy from it. So I just sent an email and told about myself, sent some goofy pictures.
By the way,
does that ad actually exist? Like, could we show that ad? I've never seen it.
Let me find it.
I don't know.
This fun, quirky ad, like I have no idea what that is.
I don't remember exactly what I put. I mean, I was pretty it was pretty in depth
like,
about what I was looking for because it was specific. I wanted to scare away people right away who were uncomfortable with the topics that I had listed. I'm like, if you're uncomfortable with any of these, you need not apply. So it was I was interested to see who was going to respond to something like that. I got a few interesting replies.
Tell us about them.
I'm not. A couple of people. They're obviously all girls, right?
Mm-hmm.
I looked at their credentials. Some of them had sent me websites or things of that nature, and I just didn't resonate with any of the ones. Actually, I probably emailed one back who I thought would be a good fit, and then I didn't hear back from them.
So I'm the second.
No, you're like the fourth, actually. But you were
the fourth option.
Oh,
yeah.
That's
no,
painful.
not the fourth option. You weren't the.
My
you were the
shattering.
fourth. You were the fourth.
God, we just started this thing. You were smacked down.
That's not what I was saying.
I have to go home.
You were the fourth conversation that I had. It was just I was taking applications essentially. It wasn't like you were my fourth option.
That's how you're making it sound.
That's not. Well, let me clarify. That's not what I meant.
You should really clarify for a
you
while.
You were one of four people. You happened to be the fourth chronologically in terms of who sent emails in.
It must have blown you away and just you forgot about everyone else.
I will say that like the way that you responded and your energy and the passion that you had for it
Exclamation marks.
Yeah, which was what made me the most compelled to want. I invited you over. My wife cooked dinner. Naomi cooked dinner. Like I didn't do that with anybody else.
Yeah, I can kind of back this up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because Scott had gotten a handful of emails and we talked about a handful of people. And then I think when he talked to you, he pretty much said, "Oh, I found the girl. She's the right one." Bang.
I did.
It was pretty
I
much.
swear to God.
He was very, very
You brought the posters
convinced.
out.
Yeah, I brought the posters out.
That was a nice gift too. I wasn't expecting that gesture. And we were just sitting on the patio, just
watching the sun
shit.
go down.
Yeah.
You know what it was that I'm really all about chemistry, and it's hard to gauge that over an email. The internet has no tone.
Yeah.
It never has. It with Skype and things like that, it has more tone, obviously. But over an email, it's hard to gauge a person's excitement or what they're thinking. I mean, you can use emojis and shit, but I don't really think that does an interaction any justice whatsoever.
Absolutely.
So I just felt like with the interaction we had over email, that your passion was I at least wanted to entertain. So I invited you over. Naomi cooked dinner, and it all just worked out because I'm all about in person. I'm all about chemistry. In fact, when I work with vocalists, when I record vocalists, a lot of people are like, "Why don't we just work over the internet?" I hate that. I hate it. And the reason why I hate it is because I just don't think that you can get real human chemistry and interaction by an electronic connection. It's starting to get better,
dude.
But
I would like to say, as a plug for myself, that the new album I was just part of, which is really fucking awesome, was all done via Dropbox in remote locations, and it's a very cohesive album. Actually,
I think it can work. I think it can work.
It's hard. You're right.
It is
hard. And for something like this, it certainly would be. You know, I mean, it's all about FaceTime. If it weren't for the wonders of Skype, I wouldn't be part of this at all right now. So it's cool.
Cody just happened to be the right person. Like my Naomi, who I'm sure you guys will see on the show. I mean, you guys, both of you know. I'm sure at some point she'll pop in on the show. She loved you. I loved you, and here we are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
all right.
So I guess go Craigslist.
Let's end the hug fest. Let's end the hug fest and move on to deeper and darker things.
Yeah. So today's topic.
Fascinating theory.
Today's topic. So let me just give everybody a little bit of a history of what we were going to do with the show. We were originally going to do 3 different concepts. Each of us were going to talk about something specifically, but we ended up agreeing that it was best that we just try to cover this one topic because it was such a, I don't even know what the right adjective is for it.
We'll get through a lot of those adjectives, I think, as the show moves on.
But today we're going to talk about flat Earth theory. I was drawn to this because I've seen a lot of videos on the internet, and I find it highly ridiculous.
to continue with that, like to prep for this whole discussion, all of us have probably subjected ourselves to hours worth of flat Earth research that we never thought we were going to have to endure. And I would just like to say that it was rough.
Oh,
it was a little bit of a struggle going through 2-hour documentaries on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump in with a bias, but it's hard to mask the fact that it was a little weird. A little weird.
I can't argue with that at all. I spent pretty much a day watching pro flat Earth arguments and obviously a bunch of debunking to reset my brain after. The one thing that I find really interesting about okay, so I watched this one particular documentary in full called Under the Dome. Now I'm not going to get into the details of it quite yet, but one thing
that's
that
the one I saw, right? That's the one you linked me to.
Yeah,
right?
I want to express to everybody and to you guys how strangely compelling that it was. I had to check myself at times, and you have to understand that when you're sitting there watching this by yourself, I was all by myself. I probably had a beer, and I'm watching this, and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of a good point." And like, I'm getting like deeper and deeper into it, and I'm like, "Well, that's a good point too." And like after a while, I found myself like getting sucked into it, and I had to pause it, and I had to check myself because I started. It wasn't like I was believing it, buying into it. But I started to understand the thought process that perhaps many people have when they see something like that.
If you can call that a thought process.
Sure.
Because, I mean, that was a mountain of bullshit built upon layers and layers of bullshit.
But just to say,
oh, wow.
I understand that the mind wanders.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like the human mind wanders.
It does.
And I think that where that comes from, I think that's derived from the fact that we all want to try to make sense of the world around us. And I think that something to think about is I think a reason why a lot of these conspiracies or flat earthers or whatever, I mean, there's so many different facets of crazy out there. I think that the reason why a lot of that happens is because people want to feel empowered and they want to try to make sense of the world around them. Now, it doesn't always derive itself from real science or anything that's factual or grounded in.
Very few things seem to derive themselves from real science these days.
Right. I mean,
everybody's on Facebook, right? You see the crap that comes down that
I do.
list.
But in their defense, and I just want to put this out there before I go on a rampage of trying to, of knocking it, I want to say that I understand the thought process and I understand, and I think that it's cool that people are at least asking questions. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like at least people like have the wherewithal to ask questions. Now where that leads may not be a healthy conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you. I do think it's good to ask questions. I do think it's healthy to question the standard thinking in a subject if something doesn't feel just right. But the thing where maybe it gets a little bit off the rails is like. That was to point out to speak to the documentary you're referring to. That was 2 hours of someone doing their damnedest to convince people that all that is true.
Sure.
And that has a big impact. I think that might have a big impact on people who maybe don't have some sort of relatively okay scientific understanding.
What do you think, Cody?
Did you both watch the whole thing?
I got about 3/4 of the way, and it's got a little nutty for me when it started to talk about LCD domes.
Yeah,
And Profile, you finished the whole thing?
It was a lot.
I watched the whole thing. The only thing that I skipped through was there were some companion video clips that they were using to establish some stuff that I think was particularly relevant. So I skipped through that. But the entire thing was broken into sections based off of different proofs, I guess, of some sort. And I did watch the whole thing.
So how were you guys going about watching these? Were you watching them completely without just knowing that the Earth is round and spherical, or were you just trying to be a white blank slate?
I went in personally trying to. I wanted to see what I guess I YouTubed. I looked up what the most popular ones would be, and this one had like 2 million views. I think it was a lot of views, so I gravitated obviously towards ones that people tend to watch more.
Yeah. Kudos to the guy who put it together. I mean, that must have taken some time.
Oh yeah, it was really funny actually how much footage he used from movies and like just pulled like little moments out of like TV shows to like reinforce his points and
where
stuff,
it just would not make
which
sense.
kind of made it a little cheesy to me. But yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of work to put something like that together.
Right.
Cody, I mean, did you get a chance to watch it?
I watched bits and pieces of it. I watched it on YouTube, and I did it double speed so I could just sift through it as fast as possible, and I didn't finish it, but there were a lot of interesting points, and I feel like I spent a lot of time pausing it and then trying to find the debunking evidence so I can, I don't know, plant it in my mind that that's not true.
So that's okay. That's perfect, actually. I would love to know what it is that you heard that maybe you thought was compelling, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about how you went about trying to debunk it, and if you could, or where that led.
One part that was kind of fascinating to me was talking about the map of the flat Earth and how with airplanes and air travel, the reason why we have layovers and such is to distract us from knowing how long it really takes to get to
pretty
a place.
fucking nutty.
Yes, that's crazy. And I also spoke to my friend who is a pilot, and he was fascinated that there's no route that goes over Antarctica.
Why would they need to though? Like what would be the commercial purpose of having a route directly over Antarctica? I mean, would it be quicker to get to any particular location?
I believe so. I don't remember the exact locations that were used in the example, but I just know that for some flying purposes, legally you can't do that.
I know that for sure that air routes have to stay as close to cities and close to airports in case of emergencies. I know that they have to be able to land somewhere. So
that's true.
They typically tend to
rough.
stick to places where if they need to make an emergency landing, they at least have a shot to do
I
that.
I thought that whole line of thinking in the video was interesting, but I don't know. I grew up in a family. My dad worked for an airline for most of my youth, and I was a little bit familiar with how that all ran. And the way that they schedule those routes, like there's particular routes that everyone buys into. They're sort of established routes, and they're based on what kind of loads they can carry and things like that. There's a lot of money involved in how they establish these routes. And so when the conversation came up that a sort of proof for this is that the routing, that they can't fly direct from one place to another and make the hours make sense and all that kind of stuff. It seemed to me that like at the southern tip, let's say, or in South America from some of these locations, that there would be a really high volume of passengers that need to get to New Zealand, right? I mean, how many flights a day would really even make any sense as a direct flight to New Zealand, right? And it seems to me that, the argument falls apart a little bit because routing, let's say, through India or some other location makes sense because they're trying to pick up more paying passengers along those routes. I mean,
maybe.
Could you also just check a compass and the whole time you're in the air and see which direction you're going?
Well,
you could see that stuff on GPS. They show it in a little screen when you're flying overseas,
this is where it starts to
Those could be rigged.
But that
that's the argument, right? That's the argument.
This is where it starts to get nutty. Is that okay? Let's talk about all the things that are apparently hoaxes. According to flat earthers, let me just go through some of these notes that I made.
Yeah, and actually let's get comprehensive there because we haven't really established what their argument is.
Okay.
So maybe we should tell people what their argument is and then delve into the issues.
Flat Earth theory is essentially the belief that the Earth is not round and that we've been told that the Earth is round and that is a huge conspiracy, that the Earth is flat and there is an ice wall around the entire thing. Now, I'm going to do my best to explain, at least from what I watched. Certain flat Earth I'm gonna stop saying it's conspiracy, but certain flat Earth theory believers believe that, like the one that I watched, that there's actually a dome over the entire flat Earth. That anything that we see in space, like any NASA footage, is faked. That gravity maybe is fake.
How the fuck?
I'm just listing off some of these things.
It's fascinating
that
actually how they explain that one.
That there is an ice wall around the entire perimeter that is like supposedly 200 feet high that no one's allowed to go near.
So it's high and it doesn't drop down.
It's like Game of Thrones. Have you seen like like the wall, the game? You know who Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah, they say it's a really tall barrier. That's what basically Antarctica is. What is surrounding this flat disk, right? And the Antarctica was apparently made by the creators. You guys keep talking.
I'm going to load up a flat Earth map, and I'm going to show.
But this disk and this flat disk was basically created by something or someone, right? And the idea was to make it so impenetrable that you couldn't get to the edges, that it couldn't be exposed, right? And this even involves digging, right? The reason why it gets so hot as you dig down is to keep us from being able to dig through the disk.
Connor, right? Can you bring this up on the main feed here? I just want to show everybody what we're talking about. This is, so this is a flat Earth, let me scroll over here. This is a flat Earth map. Now, as people who are watching this can see that, I don't even have to explain it. Like there's an ice wall around the entire perimeter of it, and that the countries are set up this way. I just want to point out really quickly that I'm pretty sure why there is an ice wall looking thing around it is that if you were to actually put this back into a globe, it would make the continent. It would make the continent of Antarctica.
Yes.
Right. Like I think that's pretty much that's pretty much it. So. I just wanted to show everybody what a flat Earth map looks like. So we're apparently all on this disk, and there's an ice wall around the entire perimeter, and we'll go from there. So thanks, Connor.
So this is not an actual image of our Earth. It's just photoshopped.
No. They believe this is the way that the map actually looks.
That's the real map.
This is what they believe that the disk of Earth looks like.
Yeah, and they feel that this is backed up by the fact that the common images are the same maps that are used by certain geologic societies from the government and other things like that. Now, my take would be that the agencies that use these kinds of maps, it's because they're symbolic, right? They're not trying to be literal.
Yes.
But they use this as an evidence piece in that documentary, and I think by a lot of flat earthers that this is the real map, and Antarctica is really just an ice wall, a sort of prohibited zone on the edges that's made to be inhospitable to humans, so that we can't, so we can't really get through it, and there's a lot of different sort of weird stories about that whole piece.
Aren't one of their supporting arguments that the United Nations map is a nod to the Earth being flat?
Yeah, I read that as well.
Yeah,
I saw that as well.
That was what I was referring to. I think it's also used by the U.S. Geologic Survey or something like that. I might have that wrong, but there are a couple official sort of just, I don't know, icons
let me read off some of the other things that some flat earthers believe. They believe that the ISS footage is fake, the International Space Station. They believe that there's no Earth curvature from a standing point of view. They believe that rockets.
Isn't that true anyway? From a standing point of view, you'd never see the Earth curvature.
Right. Well, but that's one of their arguments is that, well, I can't see the Earth curve, so therefore it must be flat.
That's mathematically just it's not proven.
Well, I mean, it's okay. So in their defense, I can understand why people may think that the Earth would be flat because sure, I mean, what is it? What is it? You can see maybe 50 miles to the horizon.
You have to, I think, 40 miles up to see the actual curve. I don't know what the distance is to see the horizon, though.
It's something like 50 miles. It's something anyway. Yeah. So let me go back to here. So they
the horizon though is actually one of the big proofs against it, but we can get into that later.
The Under the Dome believes that there is an LCD screen, that anything that we see in the sky is a very high-tech LCD screen, which fakes stars and the sun and the moon and all the planets. So, which brings up a good point. Well, why are other planets round if the Earth is flat?
What was the reference point
that's all
for creating them?
According to them, that's all a conspiracy as well.
That all the planets are around.
At least according to Under the Dome, that what we're seeing in the sky are just elaborate projections.
Mm-hmm.
that show nature as having round objects that move around, and then that we at some point decided to believe that we were similar. It's really kind of stupid, because where does that come from? Like, what is the natural basis for those projections that would have inspired that? It's like you look out at what the natural world is as presented, and somehow the conflict that exists there for these people, that we're flat and that this is fake. I don't know. I just can't put that together, right? Because everything about this sort of comes from the position of the fact that nature has round planets and has round stars.
Well, nature also tends to take the path
right?
of least resistance, and the most efficient shape in nature is a sphere. And also think about this for a second. I mean, obviously some Earthers don't believe in gravity, but anything with that much mass in space would collapse under its own weight. So it's not even possible that in space that an Earth could be a disk, because that much mass. And if you don't believe in gravity, I suppose, then there is no bearing to this argument.
Yeah.
But anything with that much mass would collapse into a ball, creating the most efficient shape, being a ball, under its own weight.
Yes.
But if you don't believe in gravity, I suppose all this shit falls apart,
Kind of. It's sort of a hermetic axiom, but I think it rings true when we look out at the natural world, as above, so below. When you look at our natural world, everything is organized in globe-like shapes, orbiting other globe-like shapes. I mean, you see that on a microscopic atomic sort of level, and you see it all the way up the chain into space. Sure. And in the way galaxies are organized. I mean, the unity in all of that, I think, is a huge argument for that being the real reality. I mean, it makes sense. Nature presents itself that way.
Sure. Well, I mean, you have to understand, I think, that from the flat Earth point of view, they believe that this is a creation. It's almost like it ties into religion. You know what I mean? It's like it ties into, like, we are special. Like, this shape signifies that we are special, and that it almost goes hand in hand with sort of creationism. Really.
Yeah.
And if you boil it down,
there's a lot of Christian references in this whole thing. Like, a lot of the people who've been into this have had a Christian background, from what I've read. And it has a lot to do with the way the firmament was described biblically. And it was the way they're latching onto it is that this was a sort of dome that surrounded us. But they don't seem to take into consideration that people back then just didn't know how to describe natural events, right?
Who do they think built this fucking dome?
I think that it, again, ties somehow to creation. I don't think that anyone says per se.
Well, in the documentary, right, the creators, it was almost like if they were aliens or something.
What?
Yeah, I mean, or God, or I don't know. Let me just finish the rest of this list of what some of the beliefs, flat earthers. Okay. Lava is explained by heaters under the earth, which keeps us from digging down to discover the bottom. Okay.
Oh, I love that one.
Great.
Satellites are a hoax. Things that the connections that we have on Earth are connected by cables, which raises the question, then how does GPS work? Which obviously we all use every day, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's GPS is a hoax.
Yeah, and they use GPS as a big point of proof because of the flights, right? So if that's all cables, then what is that anyway?
The one point that they brought up that I thought made some semblance of sense to me personally was the Antarctic. That the Antarctica is off limits to countries and to corporations, even though it's a treasure trove of untouched resources.
I can agree with that.
I would say that that's the only viable argument that made any sense to me in the documentary. It's like, okay, like look at the Dakota Pipeline. Look at like they're pillaging resources all over the place all the time. You would think that at this point Antarctica would be completely under siege. So what makes Antarctica special? Why are corporations not pillaging its resources? That I have to say is a good point. It's a good point.
Well, I think there's a good explanation for a lot of that. I spent a little bit of time digging into that because there were a lot of claims made, about the Antarctica Treaty and all that. So I linked to the page. We don't probably have to show it here because it's probably not that interesting in the context of a discussion. But I went through some of the treaty and kind of what the founding stuff was and what it was about, and also kind of tried to explore one thing that was said in the video that said there is an international navy that protects Antarctica from people.
In what way?
This was the statement in the movie just seemed to be that there's an international navy and it protects Antarctica so that people can't go there and see what's going on. And it was a very much a sort of view that this is something that's kept off limits from everybody because it needs to hide the secret, right? The edge is there, right? We can't let people go. And a lot of that is total horse shit. I mean, there's no international navy. There's no anything. You can take tours to Antarctica. It's the problem with Antarctica.
I actually did look up tours and flights and stuff. You can actually, it's fairly easy to access Antarctica if you really wanted to.
How passionate are these flat Earth believers in proving their theories then if they're not taking these flights and they're not going?
Well, I think it's real easy to be a keyboard cowboy and sit behind your computer. That's what they call it. Is a keyboard cowboy and sit behind your computer and to like make all these assessments about things that you don't really know about. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about this before we did the show, but I think it would be hilarious. I think what we should do is do a crowdfunding campaign when Virgin Galactic gets going, and we should send up Eric Dubé, who is like apparently the leading person that I've heard about. We should send him up on a Virgin Galactic flight, like raise $100,000 for crowdfunding just to see the fucking look on his face when he comes back down.
Right? That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, right. Thing. I mean, seriously. I mean, that would be what do you? I already know what would happen. To be like, well, the whole thing was faked. It was faked. Everything is fake. The interesting thing,
it's like Star Tours, right?
Yeah. The interesting thing about a lot of the people who are people who believe things like this is that a lot of them are not willing to have open debates about their position. You know what I mean? Like if you took say Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson, they're happy to debate science with you and why things are not. And there's some out there, but generally speaking, a lot of these guys who believe in some of the stuff don't believe in or won't put themselves under fire for their beliefs. They just want to be comfortable and blow their assertions all over the internet without actually having an intelligent debate in a controlled forum, which I think gives them less credibility, frankly.
I would love to be interviewing someone right now.
Yeah.
Just asking all these questions. I have so many questions about this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions about this stuff for sure. I mean, it's weird. Back to the Antarctic Treaty thing. I mean, in the video, the movie creates all this mystery, like Antarctica is this weird fortress that no one can get to, and this is the key to everything, right? It's the edge of our world, and blah 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 blah. I think there's kind of the political and practical considerations here. Make a lot when looking at this issue are interesting, and they make a lot of sense when you look into like the official story. I think politically the reason why they decided to make that treaty was because a number of countries have claims there, and they wanted to sort of freeze those claims a little bit, and they wanted to, because of the scientific stuff going on there, or that could be going on there. There's under ice lakes and different things like that. There's ecosystems that are sort of time capsules to ages long past that they didn't want to pollute. I think there was an interest in kind of creating a neutral space so that everybody could use it for scientific purposes. And I think to address sort of the commercial aspect, I think the driver for people being willing to do that, and I think the practical reason why that flies, why we're not, mining the place and whatnot, is Antarctica is completely inhospitable. I mean, it is freezing and miserable there.
Yeah, but so is the bottom of the ocean, and they do it there. So
no, they don't though. Not mining, not commercial enterprises.
Well,
they don't.
But I mean,
we get down there in submarines.
Oil.
But we don't. But we only do that in very shallow areas. We don't have the ability to get
deep
really
horizon.
Deep.
I mean, like that. That was a whole. The reason why it was such a global catastrophe was that it was so deep.
But the thing is, that's not deep compared to the really deep parts of the ocean.
Right.
Like,
but
it's
I just
deep.
mean
It's a problem for us.
I don't think that they don't go to places out of inconvenience is what I'm saying.
But what I'm getting at here, though, is we're talking about an area where there's ice frozen for like a mile. Like we're talking about levels of inhospitality that I think are far beyond what you're going to find in the Gulf of Mexico. Right. This is technologically and economically not feasible, and I think that's really the key thing. Commerce is involved in pulling out resources from all sorts of places all over the world, and it's all about money. It's all about what we need and blah 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 blah. But the thing is, if it's not profitable, you can't do it, right? These businesses have to make money, and you can't go to Antarctica and start yanking crap out of the ground without having some big problems. Right. I think that's just straight out logical. Right. It's too cold. It's too inhospitable. So
well, I don't know. It's all speculation. It is the most interesting point that I found. Now, I'm going to go back to some of the less interesting points. Some of the less interesting points that I found. Okay, so one of the things they say that of course, if space is not real, then the moon landings must have been faked. So I mean that was obvious, right? One of the things that was interesting was that there are no images of the Earth, and that all images that NASA puts out are composites. Now, in their defense, in fact, I'm gonna Google images from space here. Hold on. Images of the Earth from space. Now, some of these images from NASA, Connor, when you bring this up here, if you look, you can actually see in certain areas that this is the duplicate of this. It does look photoshopped. Like some of the clouds here, and this is from NASA. This is like from the NASA website. This has definitely been photoshopped. Like this cloud is identical to this cloud. I mean, so
that they admit that.
Right.
Actually, there's no secret to the fact that most Earth pictures are composites. And the reason is because when you're in orbit, the Earth is way too large to take a picture of. You can't get it.
Yeah, but you couldn't do it from the Hubble.
No,
like, isn't the Hubble far enough away to take a picture of the Earth?
Any one of those orbits is way too close. You can't. It's just like when you take a certain type of camera. Like if you take your phone camera and you stick it 3 inches from your face, there's no way you're ever going to get a shot from it. There aren't lenses that make that work, and things like the Hubble aren't even designed to focus on something that close. Right. The Earth is actually massive when you're in orbit. You're that close to it.
Sure. If you're like 250 miles away, I'm sure it's massive.
The shots that we have, I think I watched. It might have been a Rogan podcast actually where they talked about this, but when I was looking for that whole point and wanted to get a little more information on it, we only have a couple shots of the entire Earth that were in one shot, and that had to be done from astronauts coming back from the moon, because it was the only time we were far enough away to where we could get it in shot, and it was very difficult to do, and so we couldn't do it very often. There were only a few times we could, because the sun and on the placement of everything had to be exactly right to get the Earth illuminated, to have it not be in the shadow of the moon. Right? There was all this stuff that had to happen so that shot could take place. But it's apparently very, very hard to take a single shot of the Earth, because you do have to be so far away.
Yeah, so it's not a secret. It's
right.
There you go.
Well, I want to talk about really quickly, like why the Earth isn't flat. I want to bring. I think maybe we should
talk
start
about reality.
Let's start moving to some of the stuff. The first thing that I want to bring up here, and Connor, I'm gonna bring this up here. I'm gonna bring this YouTube video up. I don't know if anyone remembers the Red Bull Stratos jump where they sent up this guy named Felix. I can't even pronounce his last name. Baumgartner. And they sent him up in a weather balloon, right? I think there's a weather balloon.
That means tree gardener. That means tree gardener.
I did not know that.
Which is funny, given the tree conspiracy that's part of all this that I wanted to address a little later.
So anyway, the Red Bull did this thing. I'm sure that some of you probably remember this, and maybe you guys have seen it, or maybe haven't seen it. I
watched it live. So
they sent this guy up 120,000 feet above the surface of the Earth. Now, that's roughly 23 miles. That's a ways up. Now, Connor, if you want to bring up the this is just the beginning of that video, and this is really the only portion of portion of the video where you can actually see that. This is 120,000 miles above the Earth before he jumped. Now, unless Red Bull's in on this conspiracy as well. We're not even talking about NASA anymore. This is Red Bull. Red Bull has no... the whole thing about flat earthers is that NASA is the conspiracy. This is Red Bull, not NASA. Okay? This is 120,000 miles above the Earth. Now, you can argue that this might be a fisheye lens making the Earth curve, but he's not distorted in the picture.
Not.
So, this is an actual picture of what it looks like from 120,000 miles above the Earth. And now you can obviously see that there's no ice wall if you were to look at this as a disc, and that the Earth is plainly round.
Very quickly, what is that camera hanging off of?
I think it's like a beam. Like just for the camera itself, it's just a it's to take a picture of the capsule. You know, it's probably just a GoPro. It's probably a GoPro, really. But I just wanted to point out, I'm not going to play this video, but that's the beginning of it, right before he jumps. Unless Red Bull's in on the conspiracy with NASA, then this is the Earth is plainly round. So we can.
Yeah, there's another interesting fact for the Earth being round, or another proof that I think people can relate to. If you've ever looked at the ocean and seen ships or other objects coming towards you from a great distance, you start to see the tops of them arrive before you see the bottom.
Right.
The horizon is clearly it clearly implies there is something round, or you wouldn't get that sort of rising image, right? Because it's coming from that curvature of the Earth that you see something manifest itself that way.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense. Don't they have a reason though? So one of the things that I saw about they're debunking the debunkers. Debunking video about how things go below the horizon. One of the things that they said was that if you're standing on this, for example, if you're standing on the Santa Monica Pier and you see a ship dip below the horizon, all you need is a zoom lens, like a really high-powered zoom lens, and if you zoom in far enough, the ship will actually reappear. And
I don't expect it would. Is that something they proved? Is there?
I think that I watched one video where they did zoom in, but I think that here's the thing: is that the curvature of the Earth is so subtle from our tiny little fucking human speck point of view. It's ridiculous to think that. I think that we forget sometimes how small we are. Now, the Earth, in the grand scheme of the cosmos, is a speck as well. But to assume that as a human being with low power vision compared to the grandness of everything, that you're going to see the curvature of the Earth from this tiny little perspective, I think is ridiculous to start. I just don't think that. I mean, it's just not. It doesn't make any logical sense considering how small we are in the grandness of the Earth. I mean, let's start with that.
Yeah, and you know what? That's still, from what I've gathered from looking at this theory, that's a huge point of theirs, that it doesn't look flat to me. That our direct experience shows it as being flat, and this is meaningful. And I think that goes directly into the point you just made. Like, that's an absurd thing to go with, that my eyes are going to tell me the reality here. This is why we have science. This is why we have math. This is why we have cameras, because we are tiny in comparison to the Earth, and the Earth is tiny in comparison to other things. Like, we're dealing with scales that are so crazy here.
Based on that argument, then you can almost say that atoms aren't real either.
Because you can't see them.
Yeah, because I can't see atoms, therefore they must not exist. I mean, that's basically the same sort of scale we're talking about on either end of the spectrum. Because I can't see the curvature of the Earth from where I'm standing, it must not exist. Which would lead me to believe that those same people would believe that because I can't see atoms, they also must not exist.
Yeah, because I can't see cancer, I can't have it.
Right.
Yeah. How does that work out for people?
Is that why they don't believe in gravity?
I don't know.
Do you know what their theory is?
No,
Please tell me.
I don't. Yeah,
I will tell you. This one was really entertaining. Now, to them, at least to the group that we were looking at that influenced this video and at least one webpage, there isn't gravity in a meaningful sense. So they're saying if there is gravity, it's extremely, extremely low in its effect. And what we're actually feeling isn't gravity. It is basically our acceleration through space. So this disc is going through space at a high rate of speed. And just like when you're in a car and you're pressed back into a seat, right, that's what we're experiencing. That's what's tethering us down. And that there's like dark matter and other shit involved in what's causing this sort of acceleration.
So they believe in dark matter.
Yeah.
It seemed to be,
what
right?
Factions? Okay, so what factions? Like I said, I want to just revisit this topic. There must be dissension in the ranks between certain flat earthers, because some people believe that everything in space is a projection, and then some people believe that there is actually a disk moving through space. So where do the lines get drawn?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I didn't think about it in that sense, because if there's this giant LCD or LED or whatever dome where all this is just being projected on, and what the hell are we flinging through?
I don't know.
Well,
how would we know? We can't see it, right? We're flinging through whatever's being projected. So the whole thing is, well, let's face it. I mean, it's really hard to come away from looking at all of this data without thinking that it's really fucking stupid.
You know, maybe if they were more confident and were more organized in their theories and with their arguments, I might be more compelled to believe it, because they have so many different fucking things that I could not even keep my head on straight while researching this. Like I was all over the place. It's all over the place.
It is. It's hard to keep up with, and the fact that there are so many factions of belief makes it difficult to find any credibility. I mean, I guess in anything, even scientists that believe in real things disagree with each other. So I suppose that there must be people in the flat Earth world that are maybe combating for certain theories to be correct or not. I don't really understand how it all works. I
think that just for fun, there might be a picture that we could show, and I wanted to just tell a really quick little story of a tidbit I found out. If we go to my tab in our document, I have a link that's next to the word giant forests. This was a weird one I bumped into today. I was trying to look at more stuff. I don't know. Let me know when that's up, and I'll give you a little background on the image. It's from an article.
I don't even see giant forests anywhere.
It's on my tab. If you might want to refresh.
Okay.
Yeah, go there. You see it?
Question mark?
It's at the top. Yeah. It's giant forest. There's a link next to it, to theatlantic.com. Let me know when that's up.
Hold on. There's some weird skip out here. Okay.
Oh, the flat earthers have a wild new theory about forests.
Yeah, so this is kind of the quick version. Is they now have this theory that all of our forests are actually giant shrubs. And are not trees.
Shrubs?
Yeah, that there was some sort of weird cataclysm that happened, right? That destroyed our actual forests, and that what we have now are like 40-meter shrubs or something crazy, right? So the trees here are shrubs. We have no forests left on Earth, and that picture is an example. There are various structures around the Earth that are similar to this. You can see some of the
So they're saying
geology.
This is like a fossilized tree?
That's a fossilized tree stump.
So, guys, what we're looking at here, by the way,
trees.
this is Devil's Tower in Wyoming. If anyone's ever seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, this is that mountain that the mothership basically came to in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is so they're saying that the base of this is essentially an old fossilized tree.
That's the stump of what the real forests were. That as a stump of a tree. And you see like this type of geology in various places. There's a place called Devil's Postpile near Mammoth Mountain where you see some of that. It isn't quite set up like a giant stump, but you see around the Earth various formations that look like this. And so this is now the new theory. And I saw there were a bunch of links to it. I mean, one could dig into it deeper, but it seems like this is a kind of hip new idea right now. But apparently we have no forests. These were the original trees. And what we have now are giant shrubs.
So is this based off of just this one photo?
I don't think it's based off this photo. I think this photo is supposed to be a point of sort of evidence to support it, that it looks like a tree stump kind of. So they're saying this is
one photo that they have.
There may be other formations like this on Earth. I think there probably are, but yeah, this is the one that happened to be with this particular article. But there are more articles, and if anybody's interested in that,
I'm gonna have to read this one. I can't read it right now, but I'm definitely interested to see what. And by the way, like I'm not gonna give too much more time, too much more thought power, just in my general day-to-day life to this. I spent a day watching stuff, reading articles, watching debunking, just back and forth, and I feel like I could have been doing something more productive.
Right. Those are hours we're never going to get back.
It's okay. We needed to do research for a show. But I'm definitely. It's hard to. Life is already complicated enough. Like, I don't need to complicate my life anymore with with this.
I just don't understand why some people, they just feel the need inside to just be skeptical about everything and just. I mean, I guess in a way it's a good thing, but they feel more powerful knowing that they know something that other people are not aware of.
I think that's part of it. I really do.
Just an ego stroking in their own ego about it.
But I also think it's about feeling empowered. I think it's about wanting. I think human beings are curious creatures, and we want to feel like we have answers. I think that we're all driven towards wanting to know what's going on.
Robert Anton Wilson has some interesting sort of comments on conspiracy, and they really get down to the fact. One of the points that he makes.
Who's Robert Anton Wilson, for anyone who doesn't know?
Robert Anton Wilson is a sort of, well, he's passed away now, but he was sort of a philosopher, behavioral scientist, mystic, comedian, behavioral psychologist. I don't know. He was a lot of things. He was a very interesting guy.
For being an author.
Well, he got famous. He's definitely an author. He used to be he used to write articles for Playboy back in the 70s. That was, I think, where he got kicked off. He wrote a book with Robert Shea, I think is how you pronounce it, that became sort of like a Bible in the sort of conspiracy fun fiction circles, called the Illuminatus trilogy,
which I've only read half of. It's fucking nuts.
I highly recommend it. The whole book is meant to just completely fuck with your head, and that's what he was into. He's really like a behavioral psychologist with a background in
just a side note, I just want to say that if anyone knows who the KLF is, one of my favorite all-time electronic bands, much of their whole ethos was sort of born out of Justified Ancients of Moo Moo. Like, that whole book was like the KLF based their whole thing off of.
It's the Illuminatus trilogy.
Yeah. So I just want to point that out.
So what he liked to do, at least in that book and in some others, was he wove this story together where he took almost all the big famous conspiracies and wove them into one giant tale. And I think in a way what the book does is it kind of shatters your thinking that you know what's really going on. It almost makes the impossible seem possible, right? And really fucks with your worldview a little bit. And it's a fun, playful, weird story, and he got very famous for it. And he also did a lot of other books on other sorts of behavioral psychology, of how you can kind of break out of certain modes of thinking and this and that. Anyway, I'm a big fan. But he in interviews and has always been asked about conspiracies and somewhat of that because, it was so evident in a lot of his writing. So he got sort of attached to that whole thing with the Illuminati and all that. And his commentary, there's a lot of commentary he has, but one of the things that stands out that I guess I was speaking to here is that he said one thing that leads to people believing conspiracies is that the world is changing so fast now that with the advent of the internet, with information moving so quickly, it's left people in a position where they don't understand what's really going on in the world around them anymore. And it's left them really like thrown off. And that when you can glob onto a conspiracy, when you can say, this person did this thing, or these things that are out of control in my life are controlled by something else, it sort of helps give people comfort and kind of helps define the world around them a little bit.
Sure.
Okay.
That makes sense.
But
he also went on to say that global conspiracies couldn't really hold together very well. And you want to tell us why?
Well, yeah, I think I have a link actually to a video clip we could play after this.
But yeah, just give a synopsis of what he was saying.
The basic thing is, with this being a big conspiracy, flat earthers and all that stuff, the idea about this and the Illuminati and a lot of the other big
and
conspiracies,
any other huge global conspiracy, essentially.
Yeah, that's the thing. Anything that's that big is that any real conspiracy that has ever been found or understood has a shelf life or a life of about 10 years or less. That the nature of human,
if they were real, just to point out, if they were actually real.
Well, you can use real conspiracies even as a gauge for this. The thing is, primates in general like to turn on each other. That just the nature of primates and humans is one of turning on each other. And the problem with the idea that conspiracies could live on some grandiose scale is countered by the fact that all known conspiracies fall apart. And it's because everybody starts to backstab everybody and the conspiracy unravels. Right. Because that's so critically part of our nature as primates. And I've always found that to be a bit profound because it's so easy. And I know that I've been sucked into this at times in life, where certain conspiracies, you just get wound in them and you're kind of like, wow,
I've done it too.
Happen, right? And it's so easy when presented to be kind of overwhelmed by all this crazy shit that's going on behind the scenes. But it's sobering that the guy who practically created this whole area through his books is the most comfortable and unworried guy ever, or he was, right? Because he understood that none of this shit can happen on that kind of scale. It just goes contrary to everything in our nature and everything in reality. And
it's almost like the gravitational mass of it would collapse on itself, being so big.
Right, yeah.
It's exactly that. We can't sustain a conspiracy that's that broad and that long. Now, are there conspiracies? Absolutely. There's tons of them going on all the time.
Yeah.
Anytime, and he talks about that. Anytime there's a group of people who have a like mind, right? And they're organizing against another group of people who have a different mind. They don't tend to share information. There's almost a conspiracy of information between all people that's very natural, but it doesn't happen on a big level.
So it's when you're against another group, that's when it would be a conspiracy?
Well, like-minded people band together, and like-minded people band together sometimes to assert power over ideas or political power or other things. And so then you start not sharing information with others, and essentially you're involved in a conspiracy of some level of information, right?
I guess how do you qualify to get into this group of in the know?
I think that you just have to believe. I think you have to just join their confirmation bias.
I think get it on the group emails.
I think people end up there. We all have conspiracies, maybe. If me and Scott, felt a certain strong way about something in that was relevant to, let's say, a circle of audio engineers, right? And we always talked and shared things, but we wouldn't share things with those people. But we all did interact on a certain other level, right? We're kind of involved in a conspiracy of ideas ourselves, right? We have our own cabal with our own secret information, and it might not. No, you're right. But I think it's the same thing as it gets bigger, right? People of like mind, they band together. They come up with things that service their ideas or their intentions. And if you're doing that, let's say on a bigger political scale, that's how you end up with giant political conspiracies, right? It's just people trying to angle for their interests. And their interests define them as a group. And you don't share your information with anybody outside your group because that doesn't serve your interests, right? These things happen sort of naturally.
Exactly. And what you just stated, that these are people, and people have emotions. They have faults. We are flawed human beings. Don't you think at some point things would have slipped out, or these people would realize, I don't believe this anymore. I'm going to share this information.
I think it happens all the time. I think
that's the whole point.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah. This is why they don't exist on a big scale, because humans can't maintain that for those very reasons.
Yeah. So would this just be disproving all the flat earth theorists?
No, I think it's a different thing. I think when we talk about political conspiracy as opposed to theoretical conspiracy, I think that it's a different thing. I think that in terms of flat Earth conspiracy, I think it's I think it's almost like it feels like a club. It's like, do you believe this? Oh fuck yeah, I believe this too. Awesome, we should hang out. You ever seen like a Idiocracy? It's like, you like money? I like money too. We should hang out. Like it's just like it's sort of just like it's just based on like, oh my gosh, we agree on something. Awesome, we're friends now. Like I think, and you know what the interesting thing about that, I think that there probably are some intelligent people who are in
these.
that group. I imagine it's probably has its fair share of people who may not be as educated, but I'm fairly certain that there are probably some pretty well educated people. I mean, if you listen to some of these videos, it's not like there's some backwoods hillbilly, not any disrespect to backwoods hillbillies or anything, but I mean, they were fairly articulate and, used some, at least, it seemed like they were being scientific and certain, they were at least articulate, with at least how they explain some of the stuff. It wasn't like wild-eyed, like crazy scientists, like, googly-eyed craziness.
Right.
It was like, like a scientist was giving a presentation, which actually I think lends itself, like it's that tone and it's the pseudoscience, like, wow, this guy may actually, like, it sounds like he actually knows what he's talking about. And I think that's sort of the thing that we've seen change in terms of how crazy ideas used to be presented and how they're presented today. I think people realize that, like, oh shit, if I want anyone to take me seriously, I'm going to have to be articulate and not sound like I'm a lunatic.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? So it's easy to buy into it. You're like, oh, this guy actually sounds like he might fucking know something. Like,
It's confidence.
I'm going to listen to this. Yeah. And confidence probably has something to do with it too.
Sells so much.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah. So let's move on to some of the things that we talked about in terms of debunking. So one of the things I wanted to say, we already talked about the disk collapsing under its own weight in terms of gravitational and the gravity and the mass. How would you explain the aurora borealis in places that are farther north if the Earth is flat? You would. I mean, you wouldn't. But I mean, I wonder how flat earthers would explain the aurora borealis. I mean, it only happens in the north, and the north doesn't exist. So,
well, I guess from the map of the world that they present, it would be in the middle. So there'd be something important about the middle. But the thing that I keep getting stumped on, I think, at least in this particular case, when we're referencing the video that we watched, right? He's one guy, and I've been digging around trying to figure out what the sky description is to some others, because I'm guessing not everybody thinks there's some weird LCD screen.
Yeah, I don't think that's
somewhere.
But
global, that's where it got so stupid at that
intended.
point that for some reason, just in the middle of the screen, they make these things happen, right? You can excuse anything at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going with the LCD model, I think that basically aurora borealis is just another alien TV effect,
Yeah. What's the other version, right? There's got to be somebody in that whole group that doesn't believe in the giant TV screen.
Well, I think
right?
that some of the flat earthers,
stupid.
Yeah.
I think some of them believe that the Earth and the sun are like one of them. A theory that I heard was that the Earth is 4,000 miles away. Right, and apparently must be a lot smaller than we believed, and that they rotate around the disk of the Earth, so they're smaller, and the Earth and the Moon are rotating above the disk.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Which, by the way, wouldn't make any fucking sense whatsoever in terms of times or time zones, and also the sun would never go down. The sun would never go down because light travels over great distances.
You'd see it from the side.
You'd see it from the side. It would never be nighttime if it were rotated above the disk. It would never be nighttime.
It's the great LCD effects.
You would see the big. You'd see the big spotlight. Right?
Yeah, I mean, like literally,
spotlight in the sky.
We're just talking about this is not like deep science. We're talking about basic angles here.
Yeah.
If the sun is anywhere above the Earth, it would never dip below the. How do you explain a sun that's rotating around the disk dipping below the horizon? Like what effect is that? Like how? See, this is why it starts
Yeah.
to get nutty in my head because I'm trying to resolve it and I'm trying to like think of I'm trying to think of
Right.
excuses for them, like trying to make sense of it in my head.
It's your empathy.
You know? Yeah.
The sun goes through a huge range of motion that we witness, and to say that this is all just strange atmospheric effects in
Is
the
a
way
cop
they present
out.
that there is just stupid.
Yeah.
It doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense.
If
So-
I were one of these people who believed in the flat earth, I would spend my entire lifetime, all of my money, all of my time, trying to find the source of this projection. Do you know how much just credit, how famous you would be, how well known you would be if you were to find the source of this projection?
But that's the thing, you never will, which is so convenient for this theory, right? Because
Right.
you can't get to the edges of this whole monster at all because unless you have a spaceship that can go high enough, you can't run into it there. And if you did, it'd be a suicide
Right.
mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't dig low enough because they put heaters under the earth
Yeah, to create
so that it would
lava
get
from keeping
it'd
you-
get too hot so that we couldn't dig through the disk. And
And,
then they
and again,
created
to
a frozen
be
wasteland on the
clear,
edges.
this is just
I mean-
just from this one Under the Dome documentary. We're actually sort of putting a bunch of theories we've heard from different places sort of all into one. We're listing all of them in one. Like they don't exist together. I'm sure that flat earthers who are watching this, not all of these theories, I'm sure you
Hate
all
us.
agree with. Yeah. So I just want to be clear on that. Not that I agree with any of it, but I just want to be clear, to be fair,
Sure,
that
that's
not
fair.
all of them believe that all of this stuff exists. It's hard to discern what's what. So we've kind of just lumped it all into a list of things that from a bunch of different sources. So
But if we go to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say if you go to the great sort of internet database called Google, and you start typing in searches, right? You know, popularity and all that kind of stuff rises to the top usually. Looking through different sites, while there are some variations in how they describe some of these things, it didn't feel to me, I don't know if you guys feel differently from your research, but it didn't feel to me like there were huge differences of opinion about some of this stuff. Like that were completely opposed in any massive way. So while we're talking a lot about a video and kind of meshing things together, I don't know that I ran into any super strong contradictory theories where this like huge proponent of flat earth is in battle with this huge proponent of flat earth about what
Right.
explains this, right? It seemed
Right.
like a lot of little details might vary, but it didn't seem like as a general theory, the differences were that huge, at least not to me.
yeah, I mean, again, I had to stop at a certain point. I had to just turn it off because I mean, you could go all day. I mean, it's like anything. You could get just completely embroiled with a topic, and I dedicated a certain amount of time to doing as much research as I could possibly muster and fill my poor little feeble mind with before it was just too much.
Did you get to the part where he whipped into this whole thing, the Tower of Babel?
Yes, I did see
Can
that.
you explain this to me? I
Yeah.
did not
Do you know
get
the
that
story of the
far.
Tower of Babel in the Bible?
I do not.
let me just give a brief synopsis of the story. I'm probably gonna butcher this, but the basic premise is, and this is a story that comes from the Bible, is that there was a certain point in human civilization where I suppose, and I'm going to try to tie this in as much as I can. I want to just say the Bible story as I know it before we get into this part. But the story goes that people wanted to basically reach God. They had gotten to a point, or technologically perhaps, where they felt like they wanted to build a tower to the sky because they either felt good enough or they wanted to connect with God somehow. And they built this enormous tower, and it took a lot of manpower, and it took a lot to get there. And God in the Bible got angry because for whatever reason, God gets angry in the Old Testament quite a bit.
A lot. Too much.
Kind
Yeah.
of an angry God.
Yeah, it's a very angry God, and so he smote them and destroyed the tower and destroyed, brought it all down, and then apparently made everyone speak different languages so that no one could communicate and apparently get together to do that kind of thing again. So, in reference to what we saw in this documentary, that's the basic premise for this. I'll let Profi take over for where it goes from here.
Well, yeah. The way that this documentary wove it in was that basically they didn't want the powers that be, the aliens or the gods or whoever built the giant dome were super worried that if they built this tower, they could reach the ceiling. And they didn't want them to find out that everything that they had seen was just a projection and whatnot. So what they did was they got scared and then reprogrammed the people with new languages to remove the threat of a unified force finding out the con.
Right.
And then as a side, this kind of went on for a while, right? And so not only did they do that, but this conflict now that they've created, right? Because everybody has these different languages and now these different cultures that have arrived, right? This has created the tension that brought forth art, right? So now we have art that has entered humanity because everybody couldn't speak together anymore, and it created division and war, right? So basically what it did was it created division, which led to war, and that war then somehow created art. But art was so good that they needed to keep fueling all of this division because the art was amazing somehow.
I think that's where I turned the documentary off, by the way, when it started to just get into like it was the Babel story that I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore.
Right. So now out of this conflict that they created, this beautiful thing of art came together, and they wanted to really embrace this. And the reason that it was all made like this, like their vision for us was that all this was built for us, like that they created these things so that we could produce this amazing art. And so now we're almost like this experiment in creating.
It ties a lot into creationism.
Things.
I think that a lot of this stems out of the creationist need to because when you think about it from a creationist point of view, let's just think about what it's like to be. They find fossils all the time that go against everything that the Bible. The Bible doesn't talk about dinosaurs, at least not to my knowledge. I may not know. I'm not a theologian.
There's a reference in there that they associate with it. I was a creationist once many years ago.
Well, I mean, and so if you look at it from a creationist point of view, the flat Earth theory. People wanting to feel special, like the universe revolves around us. This was made for us. This, you know what I mean? It goes it ties in nicely to creationism, and we all know how many people there are that believe literally in the Bible that the Earth is 6,000 years old,
right?
And that creationism is a real thing. It gives a lot of semblance to that story. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so that it makes a lot of sense of like why that would work for some people, wanting to, again, it comes back to belief systems, and it's a really interesting thing that when people believe something, and I made a note about this, and I just want to make sure that I say this, like how I had worked it out in my mind, that one of the problems with flat Earth theory or any conspiracy is that like once you've been had, you don't want to admit that you've been had. So if you've based your entire life on creationism, or just a certain belief system, you're even if logically in your mind like that it can't be possible, you're going to cling to it because you don't want to look like a fool. And I think that if you've clung to creation, the creation story, this just gives you another stepping stone. This is another thing to concrete in your belief of what you put so much energy into your entire life. You know what I mean? It's just another facet of that to give it more validity.
It is, but let's just be clear. I don't think that most creationists believe in the flat Earth.
Well, we don't.
We
don't know for certain
what
the statistics are. I mean, we could do a poll, but
I couldn't give you the numbers, but I know for certain just based off the fact that I was part of that group at one point. Like that is not a common thread at all with anybody. I mean, the flat Earth thing is definitely way outside even that. I mean, for all its faults, and I had tons of books on Christian apologetics and all that stuff, like Christian sciences and all that stuff. And they have some really interesting ideas. And it's, kind of mostly all bullshit, and I acknowledge that at this point, but they don't go for the flat Earth. I just want to I just don't want us to say here that somehow Christians are really involved with this theory. I think this theory has some tie-ins to that. The firmament and certain ideas are kind of common. They use the old Bible references and a lot of the old ancient religious references to support this theory that the ancients somehow knew that we were flat. And then this idea came along later from, I think, Copernicus or something that changed everything. But this is not a mainstream thought, I think, in any religion at this point.
Well, I think one thing we haven't spoken about is why do they believe that we're being told that the Earth is spherical? Like, what is their purpose behind their reasoning
like
for that?
why
it's being so closely guarded if it's real.
Like what they're afraid of, why they defend it so much. Well, again, there's so many parts of that video that were like this, but this is where you just start going into stupid. The whole thing, it was really, it amounts to the same or a very similar kind of tangent that you get out of the ideas around whether the government is being secretive about aliens, right? That
we're already so distrustful of everything the government does. It's just another thing to latch onto. Like, well, if they're lying to us about this, they must be lying to us about this also. I think a lot of it stems out of our distrust for our government.
Okay.
Really?
I think that's what fuels it. But the notion, the problem that they show, that the reason why is they say basically very much like with alien theories, that the information is such that if this were to be released to the public, this would cause so much disruption in our social order that the world would go into chaos and those in power would lose power.
Right.
I mean, they basically lay it out like that.
Yeah,
I think that we can't handle that information.
Well, what was the start of it then? What was the starting point of why this was a created theory?
Flat Earth theory it goes back centuries. I mean, at a certain point, I think the church taught people that the Earth was flat. I mean, I think that was just the common belief.
Yeah. Well, sort of. I mean, history is weird because actually the educated back in ancient times, it is, because like when I think about what I learned in school, and Christopher Columbus and these sort of eras that they didn't believe that the oceans joined yet and that the Earth was still flat and all that isn't actually totally true. The most educated people, even back as far as ancient Greece at least, talked about a globe. So there were notions of this a long time ago. I think Copernicus or somebody was the one that actually gave.
But the church was pretty adamant about flat Earth. I mean, they burn you at the fucking stake if you talked about a round Earth. I mean, I think there was a time when that was a thing. Like
that's a whole nother discussion. I think that's about power because I mean, in the Bible, actually, I think it was Solomon. It's been a while. There were references to a spherical Earth.
Huh. Interesting.
So I don't know, but. I guess the idea came in one of the documentaries. It might have been that one or another page. What I read was that the aliens or the gods or whatever that built our super LCD Wonderland, they inserted this belief at one point into the population. I think it was a part of that whole thing on art. We had now created this beautiful thing and we had war to inspire it and this weird chaos sort of petri dish of civilization that had been created, that to keep that going, you insert this notion, this theory, so that people are happy and don't look for the boundaries, right? It was a way to protect from
they made reference to
the
Truman Show quite a bit too, which
I saw very many of those clips in that movie.
Yeah. It's a lot of Truman Show. A lot of Truman Show references there, which look, my personal belief, and this is obviously for another conversation. I'm not a religious person. I actually do think that human beings are an experiment. I mean, that is like, and I can't prove it. I don't have any data to back that up, but I really kind of do think that all signs point to the Earth being a sort of experimental place. Like I think that there are advanced civilizations. Do I have proof? I don't. But I can't tell you why I believe it. But just part of what I believe is that I really do think that we're an experiment. I do, and it doesn't bother me. That doesn't bother me at all. Thinking of life that way, it just doesn't bother me. Thinking that. Humans.
So why would this theory not be a good fit for you then? Right?
Well, because I don't believe in a flat Earth. I mean, I think that the evidence points towards the fact that like we're definitely on a round Earth. at least from what I know. And again, I haven't been to space, so I haven't been to space. I haven't seen it. But I also believe in, a lot of the things that mainstream science is doing. And from what I can gauge and, doing experiments on my own, seeing the sun dip below the horizon and, I've been up in a plane before. I mean, you can see the curvature of the Earth. I'm fairly certain. Have I been to space? No. And I'm sure that's what they'll all say is, you haven't been to space, how the fuck would you know? And I don't. I haven't been to space. But all signs point to, from what I can tell, that the Earth is round. That being said, I still think that the grand experiment of human beings, I think, is completely possible. It almost makes more sense to me than any other explanation we have for our existence here. I don't know that evolution, where I do believe in evolution, I'm not exactly sure that we have all of the data to put together the pieces. There are gaps in the fossil record between what we know from Neanderthals and to where we're at now as Homo sapiens. So I almost tend,
well, they weren't
again,
a direct line.
Not a science, and I'm probably butchering this whole thing, but
a little bit.
No. I'm sure that I'm butchering it. I'm not a scientist, and I'm not claiming that I know. But I don't know, that feeling that I get, which means absolutely nothing. And I can't go to I can't debate a mainstream scientist about having a feeling. But it makes sense to me to think that human beings are. It seems likely that we are an experiment. It seems likely to me. I think that there are advanced civilizations. Who knows where the fuck they are? But it seems likely.
Interview them on here.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, could you make some contact? Because I think that would be a hell of an interview.
Yeah.
What should our method of contact
But I also
be?
don't believe in a flat Earth either. So
that's reassuring.
I also don't think that we're the center of the universe. I think that that's pretty arrogant to think.
Well,
that
we're not. We are a very, very tiny speck in a very, 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 very big place.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. But who knows? Who knows? By the way, I just want to say happy birthday to my mom. If we actually do broadcast this show, just for all of you who are out there. If you are seeing this, this was going to be a test show. But if you're watching this now, we deemed it good enough to actually broadcast, or at least to put on after we looked at it and saw
Happy
if we
birthday,
did a good
Mom.
job.
Happy birthday,
Happy
Mom.
birthday.
My mom's birthday is today. She's 63, which makes me 43 this year. So yeah, she had me when she was 20.
She's gonna be okay with you saying her age on.
Oh,
air?
totally.
Yeah,
She
that
doesn't
you
care.
just ruined the whole thing.
Yeah.
She's probably just happy.
She's gonna be like, just cut the whole show.
She'll be totally stoked that I brought it up. Happy birthday,
You should
Mom.
probably ask her first, and she might ask you to
She
edit
doesn't
it out.
care. She's cool.
later.
She's totally cool. So, what else do we have? Anything? Do we have any other points we want to bring up?
Let us
Any
see.
points we want to bring up?
Well, if anyone is interested in looking at these, I think we should definitely put up the links because I found a whole flat Earth starter kit for the newbies who are getting into
Ooh.
the flat Earth theories.
Let's see what that
And
is.
I think we should have that on a website somewhere for people to look at and
So,
get some
Okay.
information.
Connor, will you put that up?
Yeah, I'll put that up in show notes or something.
Yeah.
So
We could, if it's interesting
So I guess
to
it's on
anybody.
Reddit. Wow, there's a lot of.
There's so many
stuff.
damn links.
Wow.
Cool.
Well, guys, if you want to get into flat Earth theory,
Just read over some
Let
of
me
them.
just zoom into this link here. It's Reddit, and I'm not even going to try to say what that is. You're just going to have to. You could probably just Google
The world is
Reddit.
flat.
The world is flat. Yeah.
r/the world is flat.
I mean, I'm certainly not condoning. I'm not trying to get any young people into. I mean, it's great to ask questions.
Yeah,
and again,
ask questions.
I do want to bring up the point that I think that it's important to ask questions. I think that that's great. But in terms of it's just here's the thing. Conspiracy is sexy. It really is. Debunking shit's not sexy. It's not. And I understand why it's so easy to buy into conspiracy, because it's sexy. It's sexy. It's like, ooh, let's cause ripples and waves, and we all want a voice. We want to be heard. We want to be heard outside of the noise of everything else that's going on. So I think sometimes we pick something and we go with it, and it may make sense. There might even be science that you think that supports it, but I typically. So I want to bring up just really quickly. I saw this great documentary on mathematics, and I forgot what it was called, but I was really interested, and they talked about the golden ratio, and they talked about a bunch of other amazing things. But one thing that really piqued my interest was they did this experiment. It's the jelly bean experiment. Does anybody know about what this is? The jelly bean
Tell
experiment?
me about it.
Yeah.
So they take a big jar, they put a bunch of jelly beans in it, and what this guy did, this mathematician who was the narrator for this documentary, went around and asked, I think, 100 or 200 people, how many jelly beans do you think are in this jar, right? One person said, 10,000, blah, blah, blah. One person said 5. I mean, just to be a dick.
Right.
And went around and they did a survey of how many jelly beans people thought were in this jar. When they took the average, when they added all the numbers together and divided it by the number of people and got the average out of it, I think they were within like 5 jelly beans of what was in the jar. So it was very interesting to me, and apparently this is a common thing that happens, that human beings as a group have and I'm sure it has to do with the law of averages, but there's an intelligence to an average of what people think.
Right.
And I think that if you look at the data, I think there are probably more people that believe in mainstream science, which I think will probably end up being the average.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's interesting. Mathematically, I think that it's not likely that the Earth is flat, because I think that,
well, who are the celebrities that believe this? Who are the people who kind of have...
What was it? Connor, what was that one rapper? It was like
B.O.B.
B.O.B. And there's Shaq, right?
Right. And yeah,
Shaquille O'Neal.
Dr. Shaquille O'Neal, which apparently, from what we found out later, he was
joking.
quote unquote joking.
He was joking.
Was he really? Because when I heard
I call
that,
bullshit on that. I call bullshit on that.
Right?
Yeah.
That sounds like he's just backing out later because he got schooled.
That's what I think. I think his people were like, dude, you look like an idiot.
Because when you read those original articles,
yeah,
when you read those original articles, it's like
But he said
it didn't sound
podcast.
like someone making a joke.
Was it? I don't know.
It was on a podcast.
I don't know. I don't know where it happened.
He was quoted pretty widely, and it didn't sound like he was
Tia
trying
Tequila.
to play a
Okay,
joke.
so there's Tia Tequila, by the way, who was a MySpace celebrity.
She also had a show
and now
called
is
A Shot at Love.
is now a porn star, by the way. It's okay.
Oh, I know. I've
My
watched
little
all of
sister's
her
a porn
porn.
star, so
I've
I guess
watched
I can't.
all of her porn.
So here, let's do
What
this.
are your reviews?
Connor, let's put the Tia
Actually,
Tequila.
her porn's pretty good as far as porn goes.
1 or 2 thumbs up.
She's not bad to
this
look
is Tia
at. She's just
Tequila.
an idiot. I mean,
You're
she's
all
a
gonna feel
fucking
so
idiot.
fucking stupid when I post the proof for flat Earth. Should I do it now or later? Either way, you lose.
Did she post the proof? Capitals proof.
Is it there?
No, I don't. Think
I want
it's
the
just,
proof.
It's just a link Connor sent me of a yeah. I don't think she has any proof, and I think that rapper B.O.B., who I've never heard of before, by the way.
There's 2 more.
There was Shaquille O'Neal, but then there's like, if you look at the Joe Rogan show, there's Eddie Bravo. I mean, there's a lot of people that believe in it. I don't know. I typically tend to stay away from InfoWars, but I wonder if Alex Jones.
God.
Dude.
I don't even start with that.
I know. That guy is a fucking maniac, man. I like, he was on Rogan one time, and I watch Rogan all the time.
I watched that today.
I
in
couldn't
the
even
search
get
of
through
more
it.
information.
It's like I don't.
my God.
It's insane. He's insane. Like I can't even, like, it's too much.
Who was it again?
His name's Alex Jones, and he runs a conspiracy site called InfoWars, and it's just if you want to just go down the rabbit hole of shit that you'll never get time back from your life. Hold on.
Oh, he's the worst.
Connor's got a link for me here. What am I looking at, Connor?
He's got a segment.
No, I'm not going to put the InfoWars segment. I can't.
Yeah,
I'm not getting into a YouTube video of that. It's too much. We'll do it another time. It's
Another
just
episode.
Yeah, it's too much, man.
He's taking a call, someone who's trying to convince him.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna. Well, yeah, maybe we'll do
know
that
what?
another time.
Yeah. I think we could do a whole show on him. Actually,
Oh, yeah.
that could be super.
For anyone who doesn't know, Alex
don't
Jones
know.
is the go-to conspiracy show. I've watched it out of just plain curiosity before, and he is very energetic. He's very heated, and it's almost like angry. It's just anger, and the government's doing this, and blah 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 blah, and blah blah. And it's just like, bro, fucking take a Valium,
People
or like smoke
follow
some pot
passion,
or
though.
something. Yeah, but it's and I get it. He speaks to a certain demographic.
That's what
I
gets people riled
understand.
up, though.
I understand. I get it.
It's the fire.
People looking for fire. Again, people are looking for a voice in a world where they don't have any power. I think that, again, that's where a lot of this stems from, is people wanting a voice in a world they feel that they have no control over. I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Conspiracies, all of this stuff. It's like, I'm powerless in my life. I need to find something where I'm not powerless. And I also think that it stems a lot from human beings are not okay with, like, let me back up saying where I stand on this. I believe in the church of I don't know. I do. I just don't think that our puny human minds have the capacity to understand even a fraction of what everything is about.
That's very Robert Anton Wilson, because what he talked about was maybe logic.
Right.
And that we need to use the word maybe a whole lot more in our language, because our whole language is designed to be very certain about things that we really don't have any ability to be certain about. And so we frame everything in these very
absolutes,
convinced ways, absolutes that don't exist, because ultimately, from his perspective, we're viewing everything through a reality tunnel that is our own.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so it's not the same thing from person to person.
And I think what happens,
absolute is a very tricky notion.
Yeah. And I think what happens is, as human beings, we all want to make sense of the world around us. I mean, every single one of us, we don't like what we don't understand. In fact, a lot of fear and a lot of bad things come from the fear of the unknown. If someone's different from you, it creates a phobia of. There's a lot of phobia of the unknown.
Yeah.
So I think in order to put our world that is so confusing and hard into some sort of frame of reference that makes any fucking sense and gives us some sort of power over our reality, it's a lot like religion. Religion says we have the answers. We have the answers. We can tell you while you're here. People are like, oh my gosh, great. I'm so glad that you can put this into frame of reference. And the fact of the matter is that nobody has the answers. Yeah. Nobody knows. And I think that, honestly, the universe is constantly. You ever seen those oil projections where it's got light going through and the thing turns and it's heat and it's.
It was every 90s rave you ever went to, kind of thing.
Like 1 second you can kind of see you can
in the 90s,
right? But basically the premise is it's like 1 second.
God.
You stare at this thing on the wall, and 1 second you're like, "Oh, I see a face," and all of a sudden the face just melts off, and it's like,
that's
"Oh wait, I see
that's
a dog."
just the acid, Scott.
Right? Plenty of that.
Come on.
But I think that the universe is much like that. I think that it's constantly in flux. The 1 minute you think that you have, this is being proven in physics all the time. The things that we thought we knew today are changing tomorrow. I think that things are constantly in flux. I think that there is no answer. I think that, obviously on our time frame, things move pretty slow, at least from our point of view. But I think that just things are constantly changing. Who knows that gravity may not even be real. Gravity might be gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think the universe could.
I don't know about that.
What I'm saying is that
shit changes.
I think that it's possible that the universe could change at any moment, and like just because we want to believe that gravity is going to be here tomorrow, I think it has no obligation to us to be here tomorrow.
Well, it does. Because forces. I mean, here's the thing. Here's where I feel a little bit differently. What changes is our understanding of why things happen the way they do and why nature behaves the way it does. And as we learn more and more, that shifts, right? But the whole universe, every single thing we see is part of systems, right? And that we can study, that we can measure. So a lot of the information that we have, why there is gravity or what gravity means, we might not right now, let's say, know exactly the mathematics behind how it happens. But it is a very, very real force. That's not just going to vanish.
Oh, no, I understand that.
So we're looking that we know a whole lot about the universe in very concrete terms. Our understanding of the mechanics behind them shifts.
But I don't think that the universe is under any obligation to keep those rules the same way just because we believe that they're going to be that way.
I mean, the only reason why that wouldn't happen would be if they're not in a system and they're conscious, and now we're talking about like a godhead that decided to change the order of nature.
I mean, there's a multiverse theory too, where all infinite possibilities play out in different,
different kind of discussion, though.
Sure, and I don't want to get too
taking the craziest extreme, saying, God could will it into something else.
So let's boil this back down to the original point: is that I think that people are looking to make sense out of their world. The world is crazy, it's scary, and people need to put it into a box just so they can get through their fucking day. And I understand that. I understand it. I get it.
I had a
and we're
clip,
looking for answers.
actually, that talked
you know?
about that. I had a clip from Robert Anton Wilson that talked almost exactly to that point, and I forget if it's one point. I have two different times in one video. I'm not sure which one it is now, so maybe we'll hold off. But where he talked a lot about that and kind of what I alluded to earlier, that the world is changing really fast and it's throwing people off, and a lot of that's what gets them to hold on to theories and different things,
Right.
because they're needing to create a sort of an order out of all of that change.
Sure.
Some of that stuff just brings tears to my eyes, just thinking about just being so lost and just grasping onto anything to, I don't know, feel some sort of security or what have you.
Sure.
To get through your day. I mean, life is fucking hard.
It is. I
points.
understand, and I've tried to be a little bit compassionate towards people with a different view. I think that the science doesn't exactly make sense to me, but I do understand the notion. Like, again, when I told you when I started watching this documentary, I'm like, shit. I'm like, that's a good point. Like, my mind's starting to wander. It's like I understand the process in which it happens.
That's a nice way to look at it, too.
Profile was laughing at me because I was telling him, like, dude, I'm like, some of these points are good, but I understand. I can see a compassion. If I look at it compassionately, I understand how it happens. I understand.
We should be very compassionate about all the fucking idiots in this world, because that's when I watched that video. That's all that really came to mind.
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, I would love to send up some of these guys on a space flight and see. I think
Start
I would
the
rather
campaign.
send you or me on that space
I know,
flight.
totally.
Honestly.
I'm like,
Fuck
guys,
them.
you'll never fucking believe this. The Earth is fucking flat,
I think you guys would be honest about it, too.
right?
I would.
I'm like, dude. And that's
If the Earth
thing.
was flat, shit, I would talk about it nonstop.
I would totally come back. I'm like, you're never gonna fucking believe this, but the Earth is actually flat.
That's what makes you
they were
both
right.
intelligent folk, is
Right.
because you can take new information and have your perspective
and assimilate
change.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
There
when
is
you're
an LCD
disproven,
screen.
yeah.
I swear there is an LCD screen.
Right.
I saw the pixels from up there. I was so close.
That's
I could taste them.
And that's the thing about mainstream science that I actually have a lot of respect for, is that unlike religion, and when this is not a topic about religion, but really extremist positions on things like extreme religion, a lot of the times what happens is people cling to their beliefs even though they're faced with hard empirical data that this is not the case. Like your belief system, and it's the way that the human brain is wired biologically, is that you will always cling to your belief system before you will let logic.
Yeah. 'Cause
You know,
everyone's got their own BS, right?
Yeah.
Their own bullshit.
Yeah,
their
and
own
I
belief
think
system.
that part of it's ego, but I think that part of it is just like the neurochemistry that it's
ingrained in us.
It's ingrained in us to fight. Like it's almost like someone's throwing a rock at you. If someone attacks your belief system, even if you know it's illogical, your belief system almost always will win. And that's the nice thing about mainstream science is when they're faced with new ideas. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there are a lot of mainstream scientists who fight tooth and nail against it because they don't want their careers, the things that they've tried to study their whole life, to mean nothing. And I think that we see that sometimes in mainstream science, where scientists who have put 50 or 60 years into a concept, and someone comes along and disproves them. I mean, there is some ego in mainstream science too, but mainstream science is more likely to say, "Okay, I was wrong. What's the data show?" Do you know what I mean? Whereas extremist views, like a lot of this stuff, are very stubborn to and closed to change. You know,
the impetus in science would be, I think, to even go against your 50 years of backing a certain idea if it's wrong, because then you could become the guy that brought the new theory about that changed everything.
Right.
I mean,
You're
coming
always
up with
trying
the
to
right
disprove
answer
yourself.
that's supported
but
by the evidence has a very strong weight, and I think that helps regulate.
But if you look at some of the things that have happened, at universities over time, I think I was watching a documentary about this the other day. I forgot. But sometimes people, they propose new theories about stuff, and you're like, oh, like I think it was even Einstein, like when he was younger, he proposed some of these things, and some of these people just didn't take him serious at all. It's because they had been everything had been based on Newton's law, and they'd been doing things for so long that he came along and challenged some of this stuff. And it wasn't. I think that one particular person took him seriously, and then of course everything Einstein did happened.
Well, I mean, I think in a way though. One could look at it a little differently. The same scenario. I think it's a good thing because it's easy for someone to get an idea, and you don't want people to be buying into an idea that's scientific, that proposes some sort of answer to fit our reality,
or in opposition to what's been proven.
The thing is, established science, even though it changes, is established because the math worked and the experiments worked. And if something comes that flies in the face of it, it probably should go through the ringer for a while, because it really needs to establish why it is better than the previous ideas that were backed by in some
the burden of proof is on the new idea, essentially.
Yeah. So I think it's probably a good force, even if it's not always for the right reasons. That there's a lot of pushback, because you don't want science totally changing with every new idea every 6 months, because only a few might ever be true, and no one would ever buy into any of it. It has to be rigorous, and it has to be supported, or we won't have faith in it.
So are we saying that scientists have somehow figured out the magical way to get rid of what has been ingrained in us to have that ego? I don't think
that scientists. No, because there's still the human component in all of this. I think that's what holds us back, is the human component.
So how do we break through that? Like, would it be helpful if we broke through that? And how can we do that? Like, what steps can we better ourselves?
And we will never break through it.
No, it's
because we are human primates.
There have to be ways to get closer.
There are, and some people find ways for themselves.
So, like, what we should share those.
Well, I think that personal human evolution. I think that all great change in the human species has to start with each and every person individually. I don't think that collectively those kinds of changes happen. I think that, and again, this it dips into spiritualism, and I don't want to make this about that. But any great change that happens has to start with each individual person. For example, you're saying, well, that's good that you realize that if we went to space and I saw that the Earth was flat, I'd be like, oh my gosh, cool. Like I've evolved enough in my personal evolution as a human being to say, wow, I was wrong. I don't think a lot of people are like that, but I don't want to say that I'm like this evolved, amazing spiritual person, but I've evolved enough in my own quest on this earth to be able to say, even when my wife and I fight, I'm like, shit, I was wrong. Like, I've learned to put, like, pride is a weird thing. It's a weird thing.
Right.
And you really have to be evolved as a person to put your pride aside and say, okay, I was fucking wrong. That's cool. I was wrong. I don't think I think that's a personal journey for each person,
I think to put a positive spin on all this too, or just an uplifting point, I think if you look at history, human history in the last, 1,000 or 2 years that we understand on any meaningful level, humans, through probably a lot of personal change, like we just talked about, have as a group risen up, right? I mean, if you think about how barbaric our own histories were not that long ago, the tendency over time has been to be less into killing and less into cruelty and less into a lot of the things that made us far more animalistic. So I think as a group, we do change and we do evolve, and hopefully that is in a direction that is enlightening. But I think it takes time. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of personal realizations about how things were better or worse, and the way that those translate from generation to generation.
Yeah, I agree
Very
with that.
insightful.
So, all right. So we're just going to wrap it up. That was a good conversation.
Awesome, yeah.
Not a bad first, not, see, I'm all fucking it up at the end. Not a bad first podcast. I think this went pretty well.
It's nice, and I get to see how you guys think now. I get a better feel for it.
We talk a
how
lot.
your brains work. You guys do talk a fucking lot. Trying to jump in.
Sorry.
Well, next time we'll make sure that you're leading every single discussion.
Well, I think it's good that we did this anyway. I think that we just have to figure out the chemistry,
It's good you talk. I mean, it's a podcast. Thank God you guys talk a lot.
Right.
Yes,
That's never
breathing
been
into
a
the
problem.
microphones.
Never been a problem for us.
Yeah, that's never been a
what
problem.
led us
We're gonna
here.
get better at this as we go, but I
Yeah,
think
no,
this is a
I
pretty
loved
good
it.
one. So we'll just get better as we go. So I guess that's it. We'll just call it quits.
Very good.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Quirky. Quirks.
Rock and roll.